Okay, Binesh, we're ready.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I am Beenish Akhlaq, and on behalf of Oxford University Press, Pakistan, I would like to welcome you all to the live webinar week. Today is the third day of the series of webinar, which we have arranged for educators. The title of today's webinar is Holistic Science Education. Before we commence with the session, I have a few announcements to make. There will be a 6-second delay in the transmission to all participants as we go through this live session. The chat box is open for questions and comments throughout the webinar, and question and answers will be addressed in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. All registered participants will receive e-certificates, and the link for today's handout will also be pasted in the announcement section. Let us now proceed with the session. The session has been put together by Seema Khalid. Seema Khalid is a certified educationist from the Australian Catholic University with expertise in educational leadership and management, staff development, and school management. She has diverse experience of teaching and leadership at schools and higher secondary level. Seema's expertise is science education. She holds 4 years of leadership experience at Aga Khan Education Services, Pakistan, at school and college level. She is currently working as a regional academic coordinator at Oxford University Press. Over to you, Seema.
Thank you, Beenish, for that lovely introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined in from different time zones. So today we're going to have a look at what is holistic science education. I would request Beenish to please paste the link to the handout in the chat box, because we will be making use of the handout in the presentation later during the hour. So I would just request you all to download it, save it on your laptop. It is in a PDF version, so if you don't have any sort of if you don't have that sort of support in your device that you're using, you might not be able to download the handout. So make sure that you have it ready towards the end of the session. So let's commence with our presentation on holistic science education. I just wanted to let you know that it's a very, very broad topic, and I will try my level best to try to make you understand the entire concept behind what is holistic science education in the next 45 minutes, because we have time reserved for question and answers, which you may ask. You may start writing them down in the chat box, and we will answer them towards the end. So let's go on, and I just wanted to let you know that the first half of the session is going to be a bit about the theories behind what holistic education is like. So that is how it goes. And then later during the presentation, you get some strategies on how to implement it in your classrooms. And we have made sure that whatever we're trying to implement has something that you can do in this COVID scenario where you're doing hybrid sort of teaching. So we have made sure that we have strategies that will help you all to do face-to-face teaching while social distancing. If you're doing face-to-face teaching completely, then we have strategies for that, and we have a lot of online activities as well. So the 3 session outcomes that I have set for myself to be able to achieve are that I want to explore the approach to holistic learning. We'll have a look at how important is holistic learning, and we'll try to understand and apply active learning strategies while social distancing to make learning more and more holistic. I'm sure most of you have seen this. You can write your responses in the chat box if you recognize any one of these taxonomies. For those who do not know anything about this, these are the 3 taxonomies of learning, which were given by Benjamin Bloom. So the first one is the revised cognitive dimension. And this dimension was very recently revised. It didn't originally look like this, and it deals with the intellectual side of learning. The second one is the psychomotor domain, which focuses mainly on motor skills and actions that require physical coordination. And the third one is the affective domain, which includes objectives relating to interest, attitudes, and values related to learning the information. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you have seen revised cognitive dimension and you use it while you make smart objectives for your teaching in your classroom. But I'm just going to briefly make you go through what each level contains. So when we talk about remembering, remembering is basically recalling or retrieving previous learned information. Understanding is basically comprehending the meaning, translation, interpretation of instructions and problems, and applying is using a concept in a new situation or unprompted use of an abstraction. These three are basically the low order skills. When we talk about analyzing, analyzing separates material or concepts into component parts so that it is organizationally structured and may be understood. You basically try to break down some sort of information and facts that are given. Then when we talk about evaluating, we make judgments about values or ideas or anything that is presented to us. And the last one is creating, in which you build a structure or pattern you basically build something new from anything that is provided to you. So you put different parts together to form a whole. The next one, the next taxonomy, which was given was the psychomotor domain. Now, the psychomotor domain has to basically do with when we talk about motor, the term that comes to our mind is motor skills. So anything that has to do with physical coordination. So in psychomotor skills, the first level is imitation, in which you're observing any pattern or any sort of behavior, and in that observation, your performance may be of low quality. Then the second step is manipulation, in which you're able to perform certain actions by memory or by following simple instructions. The third one is precision, in which you're refining, becoming more exact, performing a skill in which there is a high degree of precision. The second last point is articulation, in which you're coordinating and adapting a series of actions to achieve harmony and internal consistency. And the last one is naturalization, in which you're mastering a high level performance in which you don't really need to think about what you're doing and it just comes naturally to you. So that is all about psychomotor domain. Then the third domain is the affective domain. The affective domain is something which we normally ignore a lot in our teaching learning that happens in the entire school. The first step is basically receiving a phenomena. This is basically about awareness, willingness to hear, selected attention, and when you are able to differentiate between some things and you're able to accept, to listen, and to respond to different things. The second step is responding to phenomena, in which every individual is actively participating and attending and reacting to a particular phenomena. In this, you will see a lot of willingness to respond and satisfaction in responding, and you can see the level of motivation in a learner or a student. The third phase is valuing, which means that everyone attaches a worth or a value to a person or a particular thing or a particular behavior, And this ranges from a very simple commitment to more complex levels of commitment. Valuing is basically something that is based on um, a feeling of internalization of a specific set of values. The second last one is organization. And in organization, you basically organize values into priorities by contrasting different values, resolving conflicts, creating a unique value system, and the emphasis is basically on comparing, relating, and synthesizing values. So you're going up the ladder and these taxonomies get highly complex and higher order as you go to the top. The last one is internalizes values. And this means that the child has a high value system and is able to control their behavior. The behavior at this stage is usually consistent, predictable, and most importantly, the child is very engaged and in charge of his or her own behavior. So in all these taxonomies that have been presented to you, the cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain, the affective domain, I just wanted to ask you a simple question, that which aspect does your teaching cater to? The cognitive one, the affective one, or the psychomotor one? If you want to, you can put down a heart if you feel that you cater to the affective domain. If you have an emoji of psychomotor, which is a hand that appears in the chat box, you can even use that. For cognitive, if you find a brain, you can put that too. But I need to know that mostly what are some of the aspects of teaching that come into your classrooms? Do you cater to all these domains? All right, so I can see that a lot of you are saying the cognitive domain. And yes, I agree with you on the fact that cognitive domain is one of the most commonly used taxonomies in teaching learning, and we mostly ignore the affective and psychomotor domain, which is not supposed to be ignored because that is what holistic learning is all about. Holistic learning does not only cater to the cognitive domain, it caters to both the affective and psychomotor domain. Now, the rationale behind why did this whole why did this theme emerged in education was that there was a rapid increase in artificial intelligence, and people started to wonder that if we are just going to focus on things that can be replaced and done by artificial intelligence, then will there be a need for humans to do any sort of work? So there was a lot of focus that people wanted to have on things that were only related to things that humans can do, which do not require cognitive capacities. In this thing, what happened was that everyone felt that there is a need to have an education in which we tap onto things that cannot be done by coding, that cannot be done by artificial intelligence, that cannot be done by computers, and people can still be valued for the uniqueness that they have, which is why holistic education emerged as a holistic education emerged as a theme that was then accepted by a lot of people, and um, a lot of educationists started talking about it. So the origin, when we talk about the origin, it does go back very, I mean, like it goes back kind of to the Greek concept in which they used to talk about the concept of ho ion, which meant that the universe was made up of integrated wholes that cannot be reduced into parts. The Greeks did argue that a holistic approach is required in learning, and even Socrates was seen as a holistic educator because he encouraged each person to examine his or her own life by saying the famous phrase, though know thyself. Rousseau, on the other hand, and Henry, though they were more humanistic than holistic in their approach to education, did provide some sort of idea of holistic education. Rousseau viewed the child was essentially good and believed that the soul of the child should be allowed to unfold according to his own natural pattern. Then came a famous Swiss educator called Pestalozzi. He was really influenced by the teachings of Rousseau, and he put his ideas into practice. He believed that the classroom should be a place for meaningful activity. And in the past century, he believed that the most important thing that holistic educators have done is that they have basically asked everyone that there are skills that have to be developed which are other than the cognitive skills. Very recently, there were two educators who did a lot of work in holistic education, and those were Rudolf Steiner and Maria Montessori. When we talk about Maria Montessori, she was basically popular for being the founder of the Montessori school movement. She believed that the mental, physical, and spiritual qualities of the human being are supported by a divine life source. And all these famous educationists believe that children should adopt the values of developing as a person to become the very best version of themselves. So the key to holistic education was then to develop a learning environment in which the child's intelligence can naturally unfold. We did see a lot of things happen in the world during the 1980s, and especially in North America, when this idea of holistic education became fully recognized, because they felt that the current form of education that was there was too mechanistic, and it had to change. So they wanted to have an education in which they could focus on the moral, emotional, physical, and psychological and spiritual dimensions of developing the child. Now, in its simplest definition, holistic education is basically an approach to education that involves educating a child in a manner that the child becomes a well-rounded and confident adult who can contribute productively to the community and even beyond the community. It focuses on developing care for others and respect for the environment, and it pays equal respect to the emotional, social, and cognitive well-being of the learner. Now, let's come to the worldviews underlying holistic education. It is very important to know where this comes from. Now, every other view and every philosophy that is mentioned here has a different view. There were more that I've not mentioned. Holistic education is even it's even recognized by the feminist movement as well. But I prefer to talk about the top 5 ones. So the first worldview and the first philosophy that talks about holistic education is the perennial philosophy. And the main theme of this philosophy is that holistic education is part of a divine reality, its oneness, its wholeness, and it has to focus on a multiple dimension of reality. The indigenous worldview basically emphasizes that there is an organic interconnectedness of all beings, and the indigenous worldviews focuses on a holistic understanding of the whole, while traditional Western worldviews were basically as such that they were concerned with science, and they concentrated on compartmentalized education and compartmentalized knowledge in terms of keeping every subject separate and then focusing on understanding the bigger related picture. The third one is life philosophy, in which you focus on the concept of life, which has central importance for many holistic educators. In this notion of holistic education, what happens is the idea of education is conceived as an integral part of the greater life process, and education is considered as a manifestation of life. The fourth idea is an ecological worldview in which we believe that the ecological perspective is integral in contemporary holistic education. And the two people who were really famous, who did a lot of work in terms of the ecological worldview and talking about holistic education were Edward Clark, and the other one was David Orr. Then the last one was the systems theory. Systems theory was basically an interdisciplinary study of systems in which the theory was a theoretical attempt. It recognized that there is a lot of interdependence of things, and this entire theory emphasized the need of holistic education through interdependence. Now, the four most important pillars of holistic learning in education were learning to do, learning to learn, learning to live together, and learning to be. Now, as I discussed the four terms, I'm sure you will kind of reflect and believe that these are things that are not part of the education system that we've gone through, because we don't see these values in our society. So you can then relate that what sort of characteristics would come in a students if we make them go through a program of holistic education. So when we talk about learning to learn, this starts with learning to ask. To ask is a natural act of consciousness. In this, a child searches for knowledge in its real purpose. It's not like trying to seek an answer to a question, but it's like trying to explore and learning to learn, which means that trying to exercise skills like paying attention, listening, perceiving, developing curiosity, intuitiveness, and creativity. Moving on, we go to learning to do. Learning to do is something in which we try to learn to change society through intelligence and responsible action. Learning to do is linked to learning in a manner that you try to learn a profession and do productive work. It also has to do with learning to adapt to the needs of work and ability to work in a team, along with strategic use of knowledge to resolve problems and make rational decisions. This area, learning to do, also eliminates the fact that you are just not focusing to educate children to pass tests. The focus is basically on developing children who are well-rounded, happy, and constructive members of the society. Coming to the third part, which is learning to live together and learning to be. We'll discuss learning to live together first. Learning to live together is a concept in which you try to live responsibly, in which you're respecting and cooperating with other people. And in general, you are trying to make peace with everything that basically exists on this planet. It also tries to overcome things like prejudice, discrimination, stereotypes, and anything that leads to any sort of confrontation and conflicts. Moving on to learning to be. This is in this type of learning, when we talk about learning to be, it means that you are trying to discover the true self, and you encounter your own essence with oneself, in which you try to focus on your thoughts and emotions, and it is learning to belong to a whole. It is it also focuses on imagination and creativity, and develops things as such as aesthetic sense, physical capabilities, physical capacity, social skills, critical thinking, and exercising independent judgment. I don't know how I'm doing with time. Okay, 4:27. All right. The next thing that we all need to understand is levels of wholeness in holistic education. And the first thing is the whole person. When we talk about the whole person, this is the first level of wholeness in which the holistic educator works. The person is viewed as an integral part of working with 6 elements, which are physical, emotional, intellectual, social, aesthetic, and spiritual aspects. And all these things that I've mentioned play a fundamental role in the learning process. Even when we talk about traditionally how we teach, we always see that the cognitive aspect has been favored, and holistic education basically recognizes that we have to have a balance between all the 6 elements that I have mentioned. The next one is wholeness in community. In this, what you try to do is you focus on the quality of human relationships and human interaction. So when children are coming to school and they are in a social setting, you need to make the most of it, and you need to transform that experience into a stimulating learning community in which learning is established in a manner that all the children are able to collaborate and make use of that social setting. The third one is wholeness in society. This level is mainly because you need to look at the broader perspective, from a society perspective, from a country's perspective. You need to look at it from a broader level. In this dimension, you look at the society's current situation and you plan on things that are to be dealt with at that level. So it basically looks at the economic dimension. The last one is a whole planet, in which you look at things that are part of the environment crisis and you educate for global awareness and a respect for nature. Right now, I'm going to focus on steps to a holistic curriculum. Now, in this, what can we do? We need to focus on learning which is in an authentic and relevant context as much as possible. We might have a lot of trouble, but since now we have all commenced with virtual learning, we can bring a virtual world and make the context as relevant as possible. So this can be done. The second point is organizing the learning in a sequence that shifts gradually from the concrete to the abstract. It never works if you start teaching through the abstract first, which we normally do. So anything at any level. So what we do is at the early years, we focus a lot on things that are concrete. And as soon as the children come to primary school, we still focus on the concrete part of it. But at the middle school level and the secondary level, we just forget on the concrete part and we just skip to the abstract part, which is why children have gaps in learning and they cannot relate to what is being learned. So we need to move from concrete to abstract. The third aspect is adjusting the learning for variant ability learners. We know that we all have different types of learners. We don't have just one set, which is the high achievers and the average achievers. We do have 3 sets of children, and we need to make sure that every child feels challenged. So there has to be differentiation for every child. Even if you have 2 or more children, every child is not the same. You do make certain things different for every child, which is why you have to do the same when you're in a classroom. The second last thing is integrating the outdoor environment as an integral and central component of the learning process. Now the thing is, in the schools that we see normally, we don't see a lot of space. There are very few schools which I've seen which have properly made space for children in which they can actually do they can go out and use that space for learning. We usually see schools in which they're just classrooms and classrooms and classrooms, but you can always find that space in which you can make space available so that children can be involved in a lot of activities, because in a classroom situation, everything cannot be possible. The last one is focusing on both the cognitive and emotional aspects of learning. If you're not going to focus on anything other than the cognitive aspect, then believe me, these children are not going to be well-rounded children, which is why we need to have a balance of all the things that we help our children with. This, I'm sure you all have seen, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow made this hierarchy of need in which the whole idea is that within a holistic classroom, teachers need to make sure that in order to have well-rounded children and children who are happy and socially competent and members of their communities and children who are generally doing well, what you need to do is you need to see that a child's basic needs are being met. And if they are not being met, then the child will not be able to go upward in this hierarchy of needs, and the child will not be able to excel and learn to the fullest potential. A few challenges that this holistic education faces, that it can emphasize academic learning. So if we're just focusing on some SLOs and we need to have a focus on the cognitive domain, then we feel that that can be underemphasized in a kind of society that we live in which we focus on numbers and getting good grades, then academic learning will definitely be underemphasized. The other challenge is that we talk a lot about holistic learning in the early years and then we suddenly stop talking about it. So it's not something which is only relevant for the early years, it goes way beyond that, and it should not stop at the early years. One of the challenge is that it's very time consuming, requires very good teachers, and it's potentially very expensive. It may not fit into the traditional school curricula. For those schools who believe that children should just come study things that have to do with content, and then there is no time for any other thing, it will not fit for their purpose and within their vision. Some parents who believe in traditional schooling and that it has to, teaching has to be done the way that they have been taught, and they do not believe that we should do anything that goes beyond the cognitive level. Parents might not buy into this idea and they might not agree with it. The benefits are many. This approach encourages students to learn about a subject naturally and creatively. So you're basically not trying to make them learn something, in which you're announcing a topic and making them learn. Children learn a lot of things through exploration and experiential learning. The other thing that is a benefit is that this approach helps the child to improve their social and communication skills as well as confidence. When the children are being very active in their learning, then they will learn other skills too, and social and communication skills are lifelong skills, and they will help the children in the job market, as well as in other things that they do and other interactions that they do throughout their life. The third aspect is the holistic approach aims to assist children in improving all their skills and hone their strengths. So yes, it does assist in improving, because you tend to become self-reflective and you try to improve your own areas and you try to overcome your weaknesses too. This method also inspires children to make association between different subjects, and you look at a problem as a whole. You look at a subject you look at a problem, you look at something from another perspective. You don't look at it from the aspect of a particular subject area only. So the next one is that this type of teaching is not restricted to the classroom setting. You can go beyond the classroom. You can give the children lots and lots of projects that can be done at home. You can involve the children in a lot of research activities. So it's not something that is only focused to the classroom. It is something that is very, enjoyable, active, and meaningful. Now, what is active learning? Active learning is any sort of a strategy that engages the children and makes learning meaningful for them. Now, this is a grid in which there are two sorts of data represented. The one which is in maroon is basically showing how much the children retained after a lecture, and the other one is pink. The other graph is being shown by a pink line, in which you can see that how much did a child retain after active learning. So basically, when learning is active, students do most of the work, and that is what holistic education is all about, that you make the children do the work, you make the children be engaged, and that will help the children retain a lot of their learning. Now, these are some of the strategies that I have, and the strategies that are marked in red are the ones that are part of your handout. You may want to open it. I have not mentioned all the strategies. I'm just going to make you go through the handout. I hope you've opened it at this point. The first one is think, pair, share, and the goal was basically encourage active engagement. Now, if you want to do think, pair, share, the handout is going to basically tell you how to do think, pair, share when you're doing a face-to-face classroom. If you're doing an online synchronous activity, if you're doing an online asynchronous activity, if you're doing think, pair, share with limited or no access or internet or a device, you can do that too. And you can even do think, pair, share in a physically distanced classroom. Similarly, I have just made a list of a few strategies that are there. and I've selected these because they had a different purpose. So when I was selected Think Pair Share, the goal was that they wanted to use Think Pair Share to encourage active engagement, which is why I put it there. Then they wanted to use fishbowl activity. The teachers wanted to, if they want to use fishbowl activity to engage the children, you can see how that is used. If you want to use muddiest point to monitor and assess understanding, it's given in your handout. If you want to use what's missing to reflect on learning, it's given in your handout. There's a pro-con list, which can be used to strengthen understanding. There's a brainstorming challenge, which will make you understand how to actively engage and plan for future learning connections. There's a strategy on 1-minute quiz, which can be used for active engagement, and a peer review, which can be used for providing and getting feedback on work in progress. Now, in the interest of time, I am going to quickly go through my final thoughts right now, share with you the reference list, and then I will take you to my eMate, where I need to show how you can see all this holistic learning being implemented in our textbooks too. So my final thoughts are basically that holistic education is powerful. It's caring and very thoughtful for the 21st century approach to education. It can help young people grow to, to be balanced and well-rounded, and it is it has an approach which pays a lot of importance to the role of emotions in education, which is very, very important, which is not part of different sort of approaches that we have. And that's something that is missing everywhere, which is why I prefer to have holistic learning, because of its emphasis on emotions in education. However, it does have its limitations as well, because it's something which is relatively new, and it's with the current scenario, when everything is just being looked at again, and people are revising their approaches, it's something which is still ripe for exploration. It has it has to. Okay, so the other schools of thought are more popular, and this one may not be that popular because it requires a lot of in-depth planning. It requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of time. The thing is that it does focus on things that are important, which are well-being, critical thinking, and the development of solutions to societal issues, which I feel is very, very important, and which is why we need to have a paradigm shift to holistic education. Now, this is the reference list. If you are wondering and you want to see more of the strategies that you can use in your classroom, which are linked to active learning and holistic education, you may want to mark the last reference list reference, because that is where I picked it from. This is a colleague of mine who's doing her PhD, and she wrote this research paper on active learning, and she revised the whole bit during COVID, and has put in an element of things that you can do during COVID. Now I'm going to make you go through, I'm going to make you go through my eMate. So I hope you can all see my screen. And there you go. Okay. So just give me a minute for me to go to the right page. So here is a topic on rainforests, and you'll find a lot of facts there which are mentioned in the book. You can always, these are activities that focus on the cognitive levels, but you can turn them into activities that may focus on the other taxonomies as well. But you'll find some activities that can just be used the way it is to focus on the affective domain and the psychomotor domain. Like if there is an activity time mentioned there, which is under rainforest, and it says pretend you are in a rainforest, think of your senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. You can also have an element of music and movements. In this activity, you can play the sounds that you hear in a rainforest, and everyone tries to do some sort of movement and some sort of hand gestures, and tries to move their hand and feet around with the music and the kind of sounds that they hear. So you can do that too. So it's all up to your imagination how you make a particular activity part of another taxonomy too. So these are some of the activities here which you can all see. I just wanted to go to one activity and show you how the book also caters to some activities that are part of the other
Seema,
other domain. Yes.
can I interrupt you?
Yes, sure.
On the screen, have you got it open on your desktop?
Yes, it is.
We can hear you.
It is there on my desktop.
Okay, have you clicked on share as well so it can project on the screen?
Yes, it is. I'll click on share again.
Thank you.
Oops. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's there now. Thank you.
All right, so my apologies for that. I did not know that you could not see this. All right, so perfect. I have the screen right in front of me. This is the Science Factor Book 3, which is open in front of you all. I just wanted to let you know that we have all these digitally available books that you can always ask your sales representative to for a demo, and they will show you how they work. So this is the digital book that is right in front of me, and you can see it on your screen. So this is an activity which is an activity on go fishing. It tells you about what you need, what you'll do, what are the different sorts of observations that you need to do. And this is an activity that kind of, if you look at it, makes room for psychomotor as well as the affective domain. So these sort of activities are present in the textbook. Please make sure that you do them. It's not as such that if you find something for which you will need some resources, you skip on those activities, or you make it part of the homework so that the children do it from home, and you know that the children will not do it from home because it requires some resource. Please make sure you find some time and do these activities, because it took OUP a lot of time to develop them and to have a very balanced, holistic approach in the books that we cater to. So this is all from my side. I'm just going to skip through a few pages if you want to have a look at how this book looks like in the digital format. So everything that was in the physical book is here. That's the last page, which is the glossary. And I'm going to close this, and I hope there are some questions for me, because I can really not see anything. So Binish, can you ask me the questions?
Thank you, Seema. Yes, I have some questions here in the chat box. So the first question I can see here is, can blended learning be used for the holistic approach by letting the children explore and share in the online classes in a collaborative way?
Definitely, yes, it can happen. Blended learning does not mean that we um, cannot do holistic learning and cannot involve the holistic approach. So they both run hand in hand. And in the handout, I've already mentioned that there are a lot of activities that have the holistic approach and are part of the blended learning. Um, the blended learning approach too. So you can do it, and I've given a lot of examples in the handout, so I'm sure that is going to help. And if you want to have a look at more strategies, you can always refer to the last reference in the handout, and that will give you a lot more strategies to implement holistic approach with blended learning.
Thank you so much for such a detailed and wonderful answer. I have another question, and it says, what is meant by concrete and abstract learning of students?
Okay, so when you talk about the concrete way of learning, you have to give the children some sort of manipulatives in which they use all their five senses. Now, when we talk about the concrete approach, what we do is when we're teaching simple concepts like counting things, what we do